Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Garry's Mod. And today, the map we're going to be exploring is Macey State Psychiatric Center. MS Explorer is going to be a little bit different from previous ones because this is actually a map I made. For almost 2 years now, I've been working on this map on and off in my spare time. But if you're seeing this video, that means it is finally ready for a workshop release. And if you head down to the description, you can download it and start exploring today. Which I highly recommend doing now if you intend to do this for yourself. So I'm going to be going deep and showing you every method of entry, every little Easter egg that this map has to offer, including one really obscure Easter egg that I'm sure nobody would get without this video. So if you really want to go into this without spoilers and explore it the way it was meant to be explored, do not watch this video, at least not yet, and go check it out for yourself. It's actually kind of funny how this hobby has sort of fed into itself, and with this map kind of come full circle. See, I actually credit part of my interest in urban exploration with the map urbex, which I actually explored before I started doing this stuff in real life. And I've played more since then, but ever since I started actually doing it, I've found that while they are gorgeous and fun to play in their own right, they aren't really super realistic a lot of the time. And so that was kind of the goal with this, to create an urbex experience in Garry's Mod that's as close as possible to my actual own experiences. And so for that reason, this place is actually kind of an amalgamation of a number of places I've been in real life. And so as we explore, I'll be throwing up images and videos on the screen to show you what certain things are inspired by. And what better place to start with the inspirations than this right here? See, one thing that these urbex maps never seem to get right is that you come upon a location and they're always completely wide open. You just walk right in the front doors, where in reality, I find that for a location like this, that's almost never the case. Properties like this are usually owned by someone, whether by somebody private or the state itself. And they will always put at least some modicum of effort into making sure people don't get in. And this is actually one of the solutions that I've seen. Sometimes they'll just take a big old chunk of concrete, lift it up by the rebar, and then drop it right in front of the doors. I've seen huge heaps of dirt pushed against them and all kinds of things. And so, when I started work on this, one of the very first things I thought to myself is that getting in has to be part of the experience. When I first arrive at a location, the very first thing I do is walk around in a circle to try and find a way in. And look, these places aren't Fort Knox. There's always something. The more obscure a potential entrance is, the more likely you are to have some success. When I was planning what the possible entry points would be, I tried to think of it from the perspective of, if you're a security guard coming around every week or 2 weeks to do a drive around and see if anything new has opened up, you're probably not getting out of your car and doing a real deep check all that often. And the longer a spot goes without being checked, the more likely it is that something being kicked in will have gone unnoticed. Now down here, this doesn't bear fruit. That door is boarded up, so we continue our 360 check. We continue making our way around the side, and we can see a door, but things that are so obvious as this will pretty much never be open. But that over there, that's something that would give me pause. Porta potties, a couple of dumpsters, that indicates that someone is doing some kind of work here right now. And those dumpsters would lead me to believe that maybe some kind of asbestos abatement is about to start. This place's days could be numbered. But here we find a spot where the board is missing from the window. Someone probably would have pried it off trying to get in, but no luck. There's no getting through these bars. But it does allow some light to pour in on the ground level, and we can see that we're looking through to a kitchen. It's always those glimpses, I think, that tease you. There's only a handful of these missing boards on the first floor, but I think it's one of those things to kind of make you want it while you're still looking for a way in. And up, we see right there is an open garage door. We pull out our flashlight, and no dice. Yeah, when you're doing your 360 probe of a place, there are so many false starts that it's kind of become a meme within my group. That disappointment when you see something like this, getting your hopes up, and then see that it actually leads to nowhere. Sometimes I think property owners do this just to troll people. Horror Baby seems to be on the job. Yeah, I tried to have kind of an infra sense of humor with this, and hopefully that comes across in some areas. But we continue our 360 check, however, it looks like there's not going to be a whole lot to see around the back. We come around the other side now, kind of back to where we started, and you can see that the plant life inside this courtyard has kind of spilled over the edge and completely overtaken this loading dock. This was something that I really wanted to do and apply throughout the entire map, where basically, even though it's a state building, the room design and all that is very cookie cutter, decay and overgrowth and graffiti and all that stuff will lead to no two places truly being the same. But we shine our light over here, and if you look through the plants, you can actually see that this door has been knocked down. And that is the green light where, if we're willing to push through this, which would be a lot more annoying in real life, we find the first of 3 ways inside the building. Now, once you're at this point, you're in. There are no keys to be found. There are no random piles of rubble that seemingly came from nowhere blocking your path. There are a couple of locked doors which might force you to take another way around, but that's it. For the most part, once you're in, you're in. And the only thing that'll influence your path through the building is your entry point and your own curiosity, following whatever piques your interest. But I'm not here to get in right now. I am going to show you the other 2 potential entry points. Walking back to that first loading bay that turned out to be a dead end, we shine our light up there and we can see, hello, what's that? An open window, sitting right on top of the loading bay. And there's a dumpster right there. We can't quite make that, but maybe the construction crew can help us out. Oh look, they've left a couple of chairs just sitting here. Let's just bring you over here. I've tried this, and it does also work by jumping up on top of the door frame. But let's just place you here, jump ourselves up, and up we go. And now we are on the back. There's actually a couple of ways to enter here. There's also another window open further down. But for now, we'll be focusing on right here. And with this, we can gain entry onto the second floor. It's a little bit tough in VR to crouch through, but something I find kind of interesting is that there's a chair right up against here. Of course, in real life, it would be a little bit of effort to climb up on this waist-high window. And so there's a lot of things like this throughout the map. I want to show kind of the overlapping layers of history here, the different eras of the hospital's operation, but also things that have happened since its closure, things people have done with it since then. In this case, just a little nod that at some point, once upon a time, somebody probably had the same idea as you. In order to access the third, final, and my personal favorite entry point, although feel free to disagree since I know I would hate it in real life, we have to swing back around the front. But before we go for that, I just want to briefly talk about a couple of things I neglected to mention earlier. First off, compared to earlier, where the spawn point was over there in front, I've actually moved it over to the gate, which can very easily be crawled under, and leaned a bike up against it. I feel like doing that gives it a little bit more of a personal story. Even if it's as simple as I came out here to explore this place, I feel like it makes it just a little bit more personal than just plopping you on the map. Makes it feel a little more real instead of just like a GMOD map. And if you look over here, you'll see this sign that says Building 89 Parking. Psych facilities like this would often be a great many buildings on a campus, where in most movies they're portrayed as one big castle. Usually something like this would just be one of, like, hundreds. And so I'm implying here that there used to be many more, and in fact there may still be more on the property. Big and small, which leads me to the next thing. If we venture off into the woods here, straight in the center, we can come upon this little outbuilding. Now, if we make our way over there, we'll find that the door is locked up tight, and we can't get in. However, you'll notice that VR does not like me getting that close. You'll notice that there are actually no bars on that far corner's window. So, if we come over here and do a crouch jump through, yep, we find ourselves inside, and what else is here but a hatch leading down into the tunnels? See, campuses like this would often have steam tunnels where excess steam from the power station would be diverted to heat the buildings. And those steam tunnels can be accessed by those who are brave enough. I'll be honest, I have made significant changes since I started exploring steam tunnels in real life. I have made this as narrow as I could possibly make it, while still allowing a source character model through. However, this doesn't do it justice. These things, for as narrow as this looks, get so much worse. And I'll tell you what else. This was also important to me. When we come down here, the soundscape completely dies. We can't hear crickets, we can't hear birds chirping, and because the idea is that there's been no recent rain, not even dripping water. It's entirely silence and our own footsteps. And there's the end. Now, it didn't trigger this time. It has like a 1 in 4 chance of triggering or something like that, but it is possible to have an experience in this tunnel. And I'll be going back and showing it at some point in the video, maybe do it in flat screen mode. Now, there are no loud jump scares on this map. However, certain things may startle if they catch you off guard. So now we find ourselves in the basement, and once more we are officially in. And from here, I think I'll actually begin the explore. And we walk around, you'll see it's mostly odds and ends, all kinds of equipment and utilities that wouldn't be able to be removed, although it would seem that some people have tried to get at the copper and all such things. You can see that the elevator comes down here. And we've got to start looking for a staircase. So if you'll look around a room full of insulation, for some reason every place I've been in just has stacks and stacks of insulation all over the place. That's not even counting the stuff that falls off the pipes. The reality is that in most abandoned places, you're mostly going to find a whole lot of empty rooms and doors that have been inexplicably bricked. That's something that's always really weird. I found a couple of places like that. You can see them in some of my videos, and I don't understand why it would be done. But you come down here, and you see that at some point, they barred off the other tunnels that would have been leading to additional buildings. If you go back down to where we started in there, I don't remember if I turned around, you'll see that that side has been bricked up. So we're now left to wander down here and have a look around. And right here we find a staircase going upstairs. But maybe we decide to get curious. What happens if we go down this way? And this is one of those things. Throughout the building, there are a handful of medical mannequins scattered around. Not a whole ton, like the place isn't a forest of them, but this place did have a few in stock. This is what I mean when I say that there are no jump scares, but some things may startle. Of course, explorers can't resist having fun with them. If we come down the opposite way, you'll see that it's more or less symmetrical. There's another staircase, which you can surmise means that there's another storeroom over here. And that's the cool thing about these state buildings. Like I said, the buildings themselves are quite cookie-cutter in their design, and so you can use that to sort of navigate even to places you haven't been, but the state of things means that no two places really are the same. You can see that this place has been tossed around a little bit more. And over here, we can see the back of that boarded door that thwarted us right at the beginning. I don't know if anybody else thinks about this, but when I'm exploring, I always like to touch the opposite side of something that stopped me from getting in. I think it's a lot of fun to sort of beat the building in that way. It's sort of like overcoming a challenge. But let's head back and head up to that first floor. You can see here somebody pointed the way to the tunnels, which might lead you there if you had entered from elsewhere. Once we get up here, it's still quite dark because of all the boards on the ground floor, but we at least are greeted by some nice ambient sounds. Now, rooms like this might seem kind of random. Like, you might be like, what's with all these, like, half walls? That can't be realistic. Stuff like this would be used as sort of recreation rooms for patients, and it's basically so that you can kind of keep people in their own area, separate groups a little bit. And you'll see that even though we had these big windows, the grass and bushes and all that have grown against it, and so not a whole lot of light gets through, and it sort of filters it in a certain way. Here we have the kitchen, and so you'll see that the floors aren't all that dirty. Maybe they should be dirtier than this because of the ceilings, but generally, you don't have a whole lot of dirt on the floor in contrast with the outside, where you can actually see that it's kind of all piling against the wall. When the walls and floors are tile, there's not really a whole lot to break down. Although, this kitchen, being a place that's wet and stores food, does seem to have developed a mold problem. Let's just hop over the fallen fridge, as you sometimes need to do. And we can finally see we are on the other side of that window we peeked in before. And so that warrants a victorious touch. Sometimes I do like to just stand in silence. When there's some natural light, just leave your light at your side, turn it off, and just kind of take in the ambiance. That's why I've chosen to set this map during the day, because I've mostly explored during the day, almost entirely, because I do view it more as a fun and relaxing thing rather than a creepy thing. However, there is a night version of this map, and don't worry, I'll be previewing that a little bit at the end of this. Why were you not open? There you go. I don't know why you were having a problem. Oh, but there's something down this hall that's really, really cool that I want to show you. We find ourselves now in the cafeteria, and often places like this will allow artistic patients to actually draw their own murals and artworks. I have no idea where this particular piece is from, but on the other side of this room, there's actually one that I've seen in person. Unfortunately, it's not in this good of shape in real life anymore. It's been very heavily vandalized. But luckily, I was able to find this old image of it online. Stuff like this is always really cool to find because in the context of it, when you first come upon it, it can be pretty creepy. But it gives a glimpse into what it was actually like to live here and how the patients who inhabited the place you're walking through saw things. It's stuff like this that makes you turn around and stop seeing it as almost a man-made cave that you're exploring and try to imagine people going about their business here. I mean, this might jump scare you coming upon it in the dark, but it's entirely possible that this was a fun day with a group of people who had made friends just sitting around painting the wall. And so you try to feel the energy of the memories that might have been made within this space. Or at least that was the reaction I had when I saw it. But if we come through here, we can make our way out the back door and into the courtyard. Now, the idea is, and I don't know how well I achieved this is based on another real thing, which I explored over the summer at Ascension Hospital. You can sort of see how this place was meant to be taken and how it's been overgrown over time. And so it's such a dense forest that's sort of grown up within this bowl. I think it's so cool how there's like the concrete driveway going all around this building, but all of this is sort of contained by the brick wall that surrounds it. But over here we have a maintenance shed. Oops, stop that maintenance shed ghost. Now largely overgrown inside as without. Oh, and just this poster right here, I really like to think that that the groundskeeper here was present at Woodstock. Now, as we have a walk in this garden, this is actually considerably less overgrown than the real thing. I'm actually downplaying it by a lot. If we push our way through these bushes, not all of them can be. With a gnome who appears to be sleeping on the job. Get up. Come on, have a seat. There you go. And so my hope is that by having stuff like this all hidden away behind the dense overgrowth, it'll sort of give an insight to how much things have changed between now and when people were actually using this space. And we push our way through and find ourselves actually right back at the door. We look in here and we can see the first entry point, which means that we're getting close to that. I really don't like the way the textures on this look. I mean, it can probably be fixed in some way. I am still such a noob at Hammer, but I feel like that reflection looks a little bit weird on those props. Here, and start working our way down that other hallway. Once again, this is actually a real thing that I have seen. We make our way down the hall and into the medical library. The former medical library, that is. And we round this corner. And this is where... This is one of those cool things where I can see this and realize that I would have a very different reaction to this depending on when I saw it. If it was when I was 19 and just starting out, I would see this and be like, oh my god. And now I would be like, it's some dumb kids screwing around. And of course, if we turn around, you can see the bucket of paint that they would have used right there. And I like to think, in the story that's being told here, this was a group of 5 friends who all came in with the intention of pranking one of them. And they pulled some kind of prank that scared the pants off of whoever occupied that seat, who ran screaming out into the night. I've tried to make it so that the closer a location is to a current or past entry point, the more heavily vandalized it's likely to be. But in order to get out of this section of the building, unless we go down and up the other stairwell through the basement, we're going to have to get through here. So let's do a little crouch jump and shuffle our way through. And we find ourselves in the main lobby. And here's where that sort of infra sense of humor starts to come through. We have a payphone on the ground right there. We have the rest of them, the bank where it came from, right there. I said this door is locked, thank you. And so it just kind of raises the question, how? Who did this? Why? But that doesn't mean we can't go that way. So we can just kind of walk around a little bit and have a look. Oh, wait, don't forget to victory touch the front door. Take that giant concrete block. And here we find the 2 elevators, only one of which actually goes down to the basement. But this door has been pried open, and we can see the elevator inside. Although I certainly wouldn't recommend climbing inside one of these things, and we can see debris piled up on top of it, suggesting that there's an elevator door opened further up in the shaft. We come upon an employee dressing room. And you know how I feel about lines of empty chairs. They always make me feel like there's invisible occupants waiting for someone. And there is one of the map's jump scares. Of course, it's behaving quite weirdly right now. VR seems to have issues with the way things are drawn when one object is close to another, but you won't see that if you're not playing in VR. And that's the thing. Getting startled by graffiti, especially humanoid graffiti, is something that happens to me so often. But it's only every once in a while that you get one that was done with true malice. Like, you can tell that somebody intended for it to be, like, a real heartstopper. This is always the jackpot, is when you find a stairwell. Stairwells are essentially keys to a building, because even if you find some doors locked, a stairwell can take you upstairs, and a lot of times in a place like this, it's just a game of chutes and ladders to figure out where you can actually access. I have no idea, actually, what a psych hospital laundry room would look like in terms of its equipment, so I just kind of used what was here. But I would be happy to find some pictures, some kind of correction to see what this would be like. In fact, it's actually kind of weird that a building like this would have a laundry room at all. Normally, a campus like this would have a dedicated laundry building. But that's actually part of this place's sort of history that will be talked about on the workshop page itself. And here we have a little stage where patients would put on little shows and performances, stuff like this. And you can see that at some point, it's like they packed it all up for the night and just never put on another show again. The creepiest thing about an arrangement like this, at least to me, is how it almost looks like you've interrupted a performance. And so you don't know what's eerier. The idea that it was just left like this immediately after a show ended? The idea that someone set this up this way to scare people or for a photo shoot or whatever? Or if they don't just do this on their own when no one's here. I actually felt a little bit of dread turning around after saying that. You ever scare yourself with your own observations? But on the corner of every floor, there is a linen closet, a place where All the laundry and dirty, soiled clothes could be dumped down into this bin. This laundry chute actually goes all the way up. Sadly, it's not wide enough for a person, but I've tried. You can drop grenades down there. But I think it's at this point that we should start looking for a way to head upstairs to the second floor. So let's climb up here. This door is going to be locked. So we could continue up, or we could continue out here. And you'll find that things get a little bit brighter once we get to the second floor because the windows aren't boarded. Each floor has 2 of these day rooms. A place where there's no glass on the window, and patients who wanted to come in and get some fresh air could do so in these comfy seats. Something I think is kind of fun about the windows on this place, and indeed on these buildings in real life, is that it's one thing to walk around and get a sense of the exterior, but it feels like you're in a completely different world once you get inside. It's easy for it to feel small when you're on the exterior, and then so big once you get in. And so it's really kind of a weird reality check when you look out the window and see places that you recognize. It's easy to lose sight of what part of the building you're actually in. For example, if we look over there, we can just barely see the open window that constitutes the second entrance that we explored. Now we come through here, we've got all these bathroom stalls. Many of the doors are missing, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a second. Open up, come on. And here we find ourselves on what you realize now could be where you start your explore. And so, depending on where you enter, your path through the building can be entirely different. That's why I thought it was so important to have multiple potential entry points. But now, for the first time, we are in the main halls that patients would have occupied most of the time. One idea that was always really important to me when it came to this map is the idea that everything is somewhere. There's very little in the way of random debris, and so when I made each of these rooms, I actually dressed them with everything that would be contained within them. And so anywhere you see something like a missing door on one of these stalls, that door can be found somewhere in the building. Anywhere you see, say, maybe one of these chairs that can be found in the day rooms, I counted out how many would go in each of these day rooms and then move them around the building. And so the idea is that whenever you find something, you can sort of figure out where it came from if you've seen where it's meant to be. And sometimes you can look at something and think, how did you get here? Like you're a long way from home. But let's finally get into these main halls. I actually sort of regret these railings. I thought it would be cool and detailed to make this place ADA compliant, but there are so many diagonal halls and stuff, I just got lazy, and so they're really only in this second floor hall. The whole place is kind of divided off into sections, so on the second floor you'll find that most of these smaller rooms spacing the front of the building are offices for doctors, places where therapy sessions could take place or where they can do their paperwork and whatnot. What do we have over on the right here? Oh, yeah. Now this room seems kind of random. Like these stalls, they look sort of like showers at first, but no drains. These are actually based on a room in the geriatric ward I've explored a few times on the channel that just completely and utterly baffle me. I have no idea what they were for. They're huge. They have windows like this that go out onto a little divot like this, but something much smaller. I have no idea what the point of these rooms was. The only thing we have to go on is the last time I went with Maddie, who's a mod on the Discord, he was able to find a sticker on the wall for I think it's called barbicide, some kind of chemical that's used as a disinfectant in the barbering profession, I suppose. But from here, we can look out onto the parking lot. and probably generate a pretty nifty ghost story if any other explorers were to happen by and see us standing here. And of course, what abandoned psych hospital would be complete without an ominously placed wheelchair angled perfectly in the hall? We're going to continue down a little bit further, but here, this is one of my favorite things on the map. This picnic bench from outside wedged down the elevator shaft. Now, why is this my favorite thing? Because this is real. This actually exists. I found this in the basement of an abandoned medical hospital. Elevator doors open, and just a picnic bench sitting in there. Think about what has to happen for this to take place. Somebody has to go outside, drag one in. Who knows how they got it through the doors or where they found a wide enough space to even get it in the building. This thing's got to weigh like a couple 100 pounds. And then they would have had to have lugged it upstairs and pushed it down the elevator shaft. It's one of those things that you don't think about when you first come across it, but when you consider the monumental effort, probably by multiple people, to make this image take place, it's truly baffling. It's a thing of wonder. Anyway, rant over. We come back here, and this middle room on each floor is sort of meant to be sort of a staff hangout area. So you can see we've got a little sofa still left in the corner, a couple of fridges and little miniature kitchens, and of course, the free candy crawl space. A little storage chamber that someone has decided to have some fun with. So we'll have to crouch down for this. I've been standing for so long, my knees are in agony. Oop. Is that not enough? You're not going to let me through? Oh, there we go. And, somebody's placed a mannequin over here. And that's one place where you might get jump scared, but look, there is actually candy. Yeah, I just thought that would be a very Infra-style punchline. You come over here expecting to get spooked, you do get spooked, but then at the end you find out there really was free candy. I'm not going to go up there just yet. I'm going to wait until we're ready to take on the third floor. But one thing, this actually came about as a result of a suggestion that some of you guys made after I first previewed the map. See, one of you said that there are very few urbex sites that they've been to that didn't have some form of arson. And so that's exactly what's happened right here. You can see a space that would likely have been pretty self-contained, because the thing about places like this, built in the 20s and 30s, is that they tend to be built out of reinforced concrete and lots of asbestos, and so fire doesn't really tend to completely burn through a place. It tends to actually contain itself pretty well. But someone has started a fire in here, and it has caused some local damage just to this area. And the soundscape changing to the sounds of chirping birds and cicadas means that we're exposed to open air. There's actually a lot of such soundscape changes all throughout the map. We do not want to fall down there. And usually if you hear birds, that means that there are some open windows or other such things nearby. Come through here and we have more of a patient changing area. This is another one of those places where I feel like whenever you can, you should just let the natural lighting do its stuff. Both in this map and in real life. Because I feel like for as cool and as creepy as proceeding with a flashlight is, nothing beats the atmosphere of natural light, seeing this place the way it sits when no one's around to observe it. And speaking of observers, I always find it fun to take advantage of opportunities like this to look at places you've been and sort of remember back to earlier in the day when you were the clueless idiot just kind of walking around trying to find a way in. In a couple of places, I've taken real graffiti from photos that I have and just kind of made them into custom textures in the game. Of course, you don't want to walk through this doorway. And you can actually see the upper parts of the laundry chutes. This was the laundry or linen closets. And as we step through here, you can see the very first dorm room. Every dorm I've come across in a psych hospital has been like this. An open room with just wooden barriers where you'd have 2 to 4 beds on either side. Now, these are fine in and of themselves, but at the place I've been to at least, these are ripe for overcrowding, because instead of everybody having their own room, and, very rarely would you actually have patients in a padded cell in real life, you can just shove as many beds as you want in here, and oftentimes they will. Sometimes there would be as many as 80 patients on a ward. Think about that, trying to cram 80 people with special needs all into a room only a little bit bigger than this. But the idea is that at some point, this served as home to only one person. We can see the sleeping bag over in that corner, a little makeshift stove right here for cooking up some sausages. And this person liked to read. Maybe grab some books from some of the classrooms or the medical library downstairs. Liked to keep themselves occupied and gave themselves a nice spot with light coming in through this window. Of course, they also had other needs to attend to, and they did so in the best way they could think of. I feel so gifted to have come across this model because it is so perfect for this map, but it's not custom. It's actually from, I don't want to say CSS or CSGO or something. Now, you'll see these guys are here for a reason. In front of every dormitory, there will be this window where patients could line up and receive their medications, either right before bed or right after waking up. And you can see here the result of someone's unsuccessful attempt to shove this desk through a window. Actually, it's my unsuccessful attempt, because I originally was going to have it on the ground outside, implying that someone threw it out the window, and then I realized that logically there's no angle where this thing would actually fit through. So I just left it the way it is. I tried to think about how everything would have come to be in a place where it is. The attic was not designed with this in mind. That's actually just straight up unrealistic. But we'll see that when we come to it. Something that I think is actually kind of cool about these day rooms, and this was inspired by the explorer of Ascension Hospital last August, and actually prompted me to pretty radically change the architecture of this area. You basically have something that is, from an administration perspective, really convenient. You have this day room, which connects onto this hallway. You have a bathroom in the middle, which connects out onto another day room. And so you have separate areas for patients with separate needs, but it's very easy to respond and move throughout the building in a way that both allows staff to deal with emergencies and is fire safe, because it also connects onto this other staircase, which, remember when I said chutes and ladders, will actually enable us to get to the other locked half of the first floor. By the way, there's one of those stall doors. You'll see, on this side, the door is open. In between the other hallway and this stairwell is actually the staircases that lead down to the basement. But we'll come out here, and you'll see that now we're on the other side of that door. I will once again indulge in a victory touch, which will enable us to open this and go check out the office. You can see there's a little intercom on the wall right there, just the same as the ones on the side doors. And back here we have where all the storage and stuff would be. Now, in a place like this, I couldn't find a good model for it, but this is probably where you'd find all the cabling for the phone lines and stuff that are internal within the building. And you get sort of an idea of when this place would have closed, which is basically going to be that this place opened in, the hospital itself, not this building, would have opened in the late 1800s. Whoops. before being taken over by the state. This building itself built in the 20s or early 30s, but not closing until the early to mid-90s, hence the presence of large computer monitors like that. Progressing further down the hall, you'll see we have an equivalent dressing room on the other side. Although, don't worry, there is no jump scare to be found in any of these. And I like places like this because, in contrast with how dark this first floor is because of the boarded windows, this one has had its board pried off. And so you just have this nice little scene right here. In real life, you might be able to see motes of dust floating in the glow from the sun coming through the window. And once again, it's one of the reasons why I feel like exploring is more of a relaxing thing than a creepy thing much of the time. Now, what is behind this door? It is locked. We can't get inside, so we'll have to advance down this hallway. Where we will find the chapel. And as you can see, someone has brought guests for an unseen service taking place all these years later. Now, what I really want is to have... I want to have ghost stories about this place. I want to include in the lore stories that people tell about this place, and some of them will maybe have something to them and some of them won't. Now, the story that I could come up with for this is that if you come here at a certain time during the night, you can witness a ghostly service taking place for a long-dead patient. But of course, the presence of a chapel means that there must also be the presence of a morgue. Again, very rare for a building to have all of this within one structure. However, I'm kind of going with the story that throughout the decades, from like the 60s to the 90s, as more and more buildings were closed down, functionality had to be moved into more condensed spaces. And so you end up with a place like this having an on-site morgue, after the dedicated one probably closed down. Now, this all looks pretty spooky. You can see all the doors are flung open at different angles, casting shadows on the walls behind them, but this is actually a two-sided solution, much like the one that I explored in real life. Again, that's Ascension Hospital. You can see it in the video on that. Actually, I made a couple of videos on that. And because that one door is locked, this is the only way through to the autopsy. A blood bag, which actually seems to have gone quite rancid. I'm surprised something like that hasn't been touched. And even a tool tray left out. The idea is that patients would be worked on in here, stored in the middle, and then pushed out into the hallway, either into the chapel or out the side door, when they're ready to be removed. And you can do all of this without pushing them through the hallways and having other people have to witness it. In the end, I'm not super satisfied with how this came out, but I really like the idea of some doors just being strategically locked so that they require inventive ways to access areas. So, for example, there is no way to access this section of the first floor from the first floor. You have to come down this staircase from someplace else, or come up from the basement. Oh, and I almost forgot, if we come down here, there is evidence of yet another inhabitant. A mattress under the stairwell with a lamp and a book. And maybe some expression of how they might have felt down here. I actually just realized I'm not quite done with the second floor yet. So if we come down this way, you'll see this place did actually have quite a few of its own facilities. In this case, we have our own barber shop. I really would have liked to have still working, like, cracked mirrors here. Unfortunately, there's not much point in Source in placing them here because of the way flashlights reflect. So there are no working mirrors on the map as of now. I kind of wanted this to be one of those moments where you just sort of stop in your tracks. That was really creepy how all the sounds just cut out right there. But as you'll approach, you'll see that once more, it is just someone having fun with some of the mannequins that have been left behind. Something that's kind of cool about these medication windows, you can actually, I don't know if I'll be able to get this to work, but you can actually open and close them. This is not working right in VR. There we go. You can open and close them, you can jump and climb through them. And over here, we have a dorm that hasn't been quite so lucky as the other one, and has been quite heavily vandalized. And I mean, it kind of makes sense too, doesn't it? Now, I don't really like graffiti because I feel like most of the time it really ruins a location and means there's less for others to see of the original state. But to the right mindset, I mean, these are basically giant canvases, aren't they? I almost forgot to come back around to this. This is another one of those places where you can potentially get creative. We can come down this service hallway over here. Is this the one with the open window? No, it must be the one on the opposite side. And believe it or not, this is actually one of the locations where you can gain roof access. So you could sort of cheat it and just jump up on that chair and then up on the door. I actually discovered a lot of door-based parkour you could do later on in this map's development. But we can sort of push this table against the wall, it'll probably be easier with the crate than with the chair. Or actually, we might need both. Put you up on top, there we are. And now we can climb up on top of the service hall. Made it just as that mountain collapsed. And you can see the spot where I guess a couple of good friends got the same idea and decided to watch the sunset. I just love finding scenes like this. The remains of somebody else's fun day, from something as minor as this to, I've even seen an entire abandoned kitchen that was decorated with, like, balloons and party favors and stuff for, like, cake or something. And from here, we can even catch a glimpse into the third-floor day rooms. This isn't really what we're here for, though. Above these service hallways are 2 of the 3 ways where you can gain roof access. So if we climb up, here we are. From here, we can see the entire place. We can come over here and get a glimpse down into the courtyard below, see just how overgrown it really is. We can see some residential apartments, not abandoned, off in the distance. A radio tower over there. Never mind the displacements whacking out. You won't see that in the actual non-VR view. I don't know why certain things behave this way in VR in particular. I've noticed that some of the lighting is different, that displacements and certain edges don't like being as close as they would be in flat screen. But from here, we can do something I would never do in real life, or maybe here. Generally, when you're exploring, you want to avoid climbing out on rooftops because you silhouette yourself against the sky, and it just becomes so easy to be seen. But a place like this in the middle of the woods, realistically, nobody's going to see you. This might work out to be a little bit dangerous in real life, but the angle of this roof is such that we can climb up and over the attic. Over there, we can actually see the hole made by the arsonist's fire. And from here, we can look straight down into the pit, Wave at the folks in the apartments, because you just know that there'd always be some Karen with her binoculars waiting to report anybody she sees walking around on the rooftops. But you can see the equivalent other room from where we came from. Drop down, there's another way up through here, through the opposite day room. And we have our method of ingress into the 3rd floor. We could have taken the stairs. We could have. Would it have been as fun? Answer, no. But we can enter here. The day rooms are largely the same on every floor. We can also go through these bathrooms, again the same on every floor. And so there's not a whole ton that I'm going to be revisiting. But if we go through here, the only difference is that these things are cut a little bit short by an office on one end. There we go. Yeah, on each side of the 3rd floor, there's a administrator's office, which in this one we find nothing much. And you can see here that the medication window is actually pushed back. That this day room is considerably smaller than the counterpart on the lower floor. These rooms, you can actually see the drains on the ground would have been used for hydrotherapy. But in this one, the bathtubs have all been removed, and in fact, the implication is that they're the ones we saw in the storage room down in the basement. And when we come around here, you'll see that the dorms on the 3rd floor are actually different. Now, I don't know enough about the way these things are run to actually know if something like this would be commonplace, but in one of the buildings that I've explored on the channel, part of the history is that the 3rd floor was higher security. It was actually meant for dangerous patients in its own ward. And in order to mark those patients, they would actually have their heads shaved to identify them as dangerous. And in keeping with that sort of higher security thing, they also have less privacy with lower walls. In fact, realistically, in a place like this, there would probably be an observation window on the wall itself. Now, instead of being a dressing room, on the 3rd floor, this is where all the patient showers are. And so you see we have these very densely packed stalls, each with a shower head and a drain. And apparently here, the elements have caused this section of floor to collapse, and at some point somebody else tried to poke their head up through, or maybe even try to climb up, which seems quite foolish given the state of these edges. But from the fact that this is all still standing, I guess it didn't work out too poorly for them. I've never heard of anyone being seriously injured at the place I frequent. However, the second somebody does, you know those buildings are all going to be gone in a heartbeat, which is why I hope people aren't being too stupid. I say I hope, I know they are. And right here is where the place would actually have its own dentist's office. I don't quite know what kind of difficulties this clock is experiencing at the moment. That's a little bit strange. It hasn't always been like that. But we can open this door, and you'll see that although it's been contained by this door in the wall, the arsonist's fire did spread up here and caused that heavy chair to plummet through the ceiling, and the metal bar that holds it up kind of spiked itself into the ground below. Over on the sides, I don't know if I've looked at any of these. There are just a handful of closets that contain odds and ends. Oh, in this door on the left, this is like one of my favorite little in-jokes on the map. So you'll see we have graffiti in there. I'm getting so annoyed by these doors not opening. Bask in its glory. All hail Satin. One of the earliest pieces of graffiti our group found that made us stop and take pause and just be like, okay, no, hang on, we have to make fun of you. It is so funny how often we find people trying to be edgy and instead being unintentionally hilarious. Oh, now here, this is really cool. This is also based on something that I haven't personally seen, and it's probably totally wrecked now, but has actually been done. I'll throw a picture up on the screen. This stuff here is meant to indicate that this room has been worked on by a slightly more creative vandal. Here we have one single room in this rundown place, which has actually been restored to something like a more basic version of what it might have looked like when this place was in operation. It almost feels cozy enough that you could sit down on the side of the bed, look around, and enjoy an afternoon here. I'll be honest, I toyed with the idea of having a rare spawn right in this room. How trippy would that be if you come on here to do some urban exploration and your first experience is spawning in here? If you didn't know this was here, you'd wonder where you even were. You look out the window, okay, there's a parking lot outside, but then you go to step out and find yourself in the map itself. And of course, all of this is meant to give a more human side to this, to show that somebody put effort into this. This isn't just a weird thing that's here. Somebody had to do this, to care enough about this place to modify it and give you this experience that you're currently having, which is the case with every weird thing you might come across. Now downstairs, these front-facing rooms were all offices. Up here, I like to think of them as a crisis unit, a place where individual patients placed under watch would be given their own room. Now, I like to think of this as having been kind of a waiting area, a place where guests could come and visit, and they would take the elevator up and wait for patients that were going to come see them to be brought to them here, and this would be kind of like a common area where they could all hang out. Now, if we go back across the hall, we can head over to the third floor security area, and wait, actually, can we see down the elevator shafts from right here? I actually like to think of stuff like this as someone intentionally trying to block off a hazard out of courtesy for future explorers. And you can see this elevator is actually stopped right below here. Although once more, I would not recommend actually jumping down onto it. And besides the obligatory ominous wheelchair, here we have some ominous graffiti pointing to this unassuming door, which leads up to the attic. And we find this place more or less untouched, except for the freestanding mannequin that is very likely to jump scare you when you catch her the first time on the edge of your flashlight beam. Someone's even left a helpful thing right here so you can jump up and have a peek out the window at the courtyard. This is another one of those ghost stories that I'd like to be told about the place. The idea that sometimes, as you approach the building, never while you're inside, you can hear the ghostly sound of piano music carrying on the wind from the attic. Basically, the way I wanted to handle the sort of meta ghost stories when it comes to this map is how there's not actually events relating to each of them. However, everything has a reason to exist. You can always see how some of these legends came to be. And while you won't hear any piano music drifting over the treetops as you approach the building, I will say that this here is the subject of that one really obscure Easter egg that nobody's going to find unless I show it in this video. Coming back downstairs, you'll see that the staff areas just had this little convenient staircase that allows you to transit between floors quickly and easily. Here's one of the areas where I wanted to think about erosion. This is on top of one of those weird tiled rooms, but I really liked the idea how the roof collapses, a lot of the gravel falls in with it, and that sort of becomes soil that over time, as this gets rained on, allows plant life to grow up on top of it. Of course, this is all pretty heavy, and this whole roof is going to slowly start to collapse. Kilroy was here. Had to have at least one of these on the map. Could not allow this to be completed without at least one. And here is actually the day room that we were peeking into earlier. Complete with the graffiti with the dark mouth that swallows you up if you dare step inside without a flashlight. Horror baby, what are you doing here? On this side, we have the records room, which, again, this was a suggestion of some of you guys seeing previews of the first map. I don't know why these, like, little card holders on each door are spazzing out like that. They are like that in the main game, even in flat screen. But I like this idea of a space where there's all these aisles with racks that are just barely shorter than the player. Think you saw something over the tops? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Oh, and here we have a hallway where some folks decided to have a field day. Piles of clothes coating every inch of the ground. And you can see the laundry carts that they were probably originally stored in. Of course, right here, finally bringing us to the only safely accessible top of the laundry chute. We have a hydrotherapy room that was mostly left intact. Each of the bathtubs still in its place, well, all but one. And the medication window right here. Leading out onto another day room. All of the contents of this classroom actually neatly stacked up right here. If we come into this other office, we can see the big admin desk, but nothing to see here. However, I've implied the existence of several people who, either presently or in the past, might be calling this place home post-abandonment. But for the most part, they seem like they're just kind of hanging out. With this, I wanted to have something that was maybe somebody you might not want to run into. A place that tells a sad story, but one that maybe you still want to be dealt with by professionals rather than an encounter in this place where no one will hear you if you yell. With this room, I wanted to paint a picture of someone who had truly hit rock bottom. And so I tried to choose graffiti. Most of this is from Left 4 Dead 2. But I tried to choose graffiti that would be at least somewhat consistent, referring to people who have died, all distrust in the government, and referring to people they can't trust as witches. There is actually a little bit more with this room. I'm actually really annoyed. There are 3 random events that may or may not trigger on this map, and not a single one has triggered during the course of this exploration. Oh, and if we come down to the stairwell, you can see what somebody did with the one missing bathtub, which I think is kind of funny. But with that, we have actually seen just about everything there is to see as far as the actual exploration goes. I mean, I didn't go in every room. I'm sure there's maybe a couple of things that I missed. Oh, I guess on the opposite side, there is still the mostly complete classroom. The one that's so complete that it leads you to believe that it probably hasn't remained this way all this time and was in fact set up this way so that somebody could take pictures of it. That's the thing, is that, like, people always talk about the ominously posed wheelchairs, how convenient they always are. They're almost always like that because someone posed them that way for a photo. But now that we've more or less made our way through this entire place, I guess I might as well go about showing you that one really obscure Easter egg and how to achieve it, right? So you'll see here we have our alleged ghostly pianist standing here beside the piano, her torso, her legs, her arm on the keys themselves, which seems appropriate. But what's missing? She's missing an arm. So what would happen if we were to reunite the other arm where it belongs at the piano? Now you're going to start to see why this Easter egg is so stinking obscure. So first of all, you have to come all the way down here into this cluttered storage room, and you have to come to where these two things fork, and here you'll find the other arm. Now, not only do you have to find this thing and know where it is, but you also have to think to do this. So I want to pick it up, getting that flashlight bug in the process. And now we got to carry this thing all the way upstairs. Now we've brought this back up here. The trigger box is actually like pretty lenient, so you don't have to be super precise about it. But we'll place this here. Good enough. And at first, nothing will happen until Chopin. Now, I am probably going to have to talk over this so that it doesn't get triggered by Content ID. This is actually the song that I wanted to use for the opening to the McDonald's building animation, but I wasn't able to because of Content ID. See, apparently, even though it's a classic song, the performance itself can still claim copyright, so that's what we got to do here. Anyway, the point was just to show you that this can in fact be done, and if you play this multiplayer, it could actually be a creepy way to spook people, huh? Imagine they're just kind of exploring, haven't caught up with you yet, and suddenly this starts playing from upstairs. Now there is one other Easter egg which I would like to show you. This is something that was kind of added last minute, but I really wanted to reward that sort of explorer's curiosity in using every tool available to you to gain access to new areas, including in a meta sense. Remember I told you this is barred off. You cannot access this tunnel. This one that, even for how much narrower it is than the other ones, still does not do justice to how narrow these things can get. But what if you get curious and do decide to just no-clip through? Well, there is a plan for that. Making your way to the end of this will reveal a door in the tunnel, which takes you to the hidden comfy room. A nice little space where you could lie on the carpet and warm yourself in front of the fire, although this thing is quite a fire hazard since the bottom of it isn't rendering because of the way VR works. And if you come upstairs, there's a nice TV, probably a DVD player, a VCR, an Xbox in the cabinet. And Darwin just chilling here. Thanks for holding down the fort, Darwin. And this wall containing the names of not all, but certainly a lot of the people who helped me out on the Discord with this map. Like I said, I am a total noob with Hammer, even still. And the reason this map has taken so long is because it's taken me a really long time to get to grips with all the nuances and things that need to be done to make this work both on a creative and technical level. And these are the names of some of the people who helped me out on the Discord who, honestly, this map would not even compile if it wasn't for the tons and tons of help that I've received. So thank you to everyone up here and more. Also, each of these things can be found all throughout the level, so you don't need to no-clip into here to find this stuff. Off to the side, there's a nice little kitchen so that if even this gets to be too much for you, like you don't want to deal with people, you can always just kind of come in here and climb up on the counter and chill for a bit. And of course, all the books you can read and all the TV you can watch. So that was Macey State Psych Center. And I'm aware that it's not a usual GMOD Explorer video, since of course I already know everything that's here. But it also gave me a unique opportunity to really talk in detail about what went into the decisions in map making, as opposed to just speculating on them. And so I really hope that, as something different, this was a fun video to watch still. And I hope you'll have even more fun with the map itself. This has been a long time in the making, and so it's really exciting to get to see it in its completed state like this, and finally show it to people. And I can't wait to see what people are able to do with it, both as far as exploration and any creative aspect that GMOD allows you to explore. However, after 2 years as its creator, I'm finally ready to say about this map what my mother often said about me. I'm sick of looking at you. And so I'm more than ready to move on to another project now, especially because I started this as a total newbie, and now I'm slightly less of a newbie, so I'm able to recognize that I made a lot of foundational mistakes early on that have caused a lot of problems here. Also, I don't quite remember if I mentioned this earlier, but this map is also getting a night version, which will either be available down there in the description right now, or will come just a little bit later. So if you prefer that dark and spooky night exploring, I've got you covered there as well. I'm going to go now and show you some of the potential triggerables as I just kind of reload the map until they work. But you're going to have to experience those totally silently. I'm going to leave you here. And if you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more creepy and comfy content. If you have any ideas for other videos you think I should do, the best place to suggest that will be at the Discord, which I will link in the description. If you want to download this map for yourself, that link is very much in the description. And as always, I will see you in the next one.